In today's stir, Victor has aptly captured the reaction of government when it comes to, of course, hate speech and some of the culprits that we do know, and he's drawn this today. How Jubilee is getting to the bottom of Moses Kuria's hate speech problem. This is not the first time that we've seen and heard from the National Cohesion and Integration Commission promising that they'll do a very extensive investigation. Now we're hearing it's all about now experts also who will try and interrogate that particular clip. It's the obvious. And I want just to also rope in our panelists who are here this morning today on the Leadership Forum. Of course, we'll be talking about family values, salvaging the family. That is a topic. And if you've been watching this show with any regularity, you'll know that for the last 3 weeks right now, we've been talking about family. And I want to introduce our panelists this morning. We have with us Dr. Mwangi, who is a director of Center for Personal Leadership. Also is a lecturer at Strathmore University. Also, we do have with us Dr. Hart, who is a psychologist. We do have with us Dr. Njoki Ngumi. She is the Director of Outreach and Partnership at the Nest. We do have with us also Jennifer Karina. She is a marriage and relationship expert. And also we do have Professor Ngaruiya, who is Director of PhD at the International Leadership University. Good morning, gentlemen and ladies.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So looking at this particular editorial cartoon, if we may just put it on the screen for our guests also to comment on that. And we've been here before. Last year they were put in the slummers. We were promised a raft of measures that will come when it comes to handling, of course, hate mongers. Why is there a glacial slowness from government on handling hate speech? Let's begin with Professor Ngaruiya.
Difficult question. The response may sound pretty easy. I think there are times that the government is also very, very, very sensitive in sensing the national mood and thinking about the best good for the highest number of people. But I still don't have the answer as to why we don't seem to have a solution to this problem. But I think possibly that sensitivity towards the highest good of the people may be an aspect of it, but I would want to see a difference, because they have all the machinery, they have all the tools, they have the evidence. And so it's hard to imagine why we do not have a solution. And I don't have an easy answer to it.
All right, let's hear from Hart. It's a psychological problem.
Yeah, I think the real problem is this. I think any society that aims to be free tries to maintain free speech. And the problem with that is defining a boundary between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And I think people will always probe that boundary. So it doesn't matter where you define it, somebody will walk over it next time. And so I think authorities everywhere have a reluctance to prosecute what you might call hate speech. They draw back, really trying to allow society itself to form the boundary. In other words, if somebody says something truly appalling, society usually reacts pretty vigorously to it, and without involving the law or any such process. Mm-hmm. So I sympathize with the people in power when somebody says something outrageous. It's a very difficult thing to say, this is right, this is wrong, I'm going to prohibit this, I'm going to allow that. Instantly you're in a minefield. So I'm really quite sympathetic to them.
Mm-hmm. So when also it comes to the law of defining hate speech, we've seen there's a lot of ambiguity, or when it comes also to our constitution, we don't have an ironclad definition on what hate speech is all about. Dr. Mwangi.
Yeah, I just want to take a step back and realize and point out to the fact that we have a challenge in this country in relation to the concept of impunity, where people know that whatever I do, it will be very difficult for anyone to stick it on me as a crime, and therefore we can continue doing it. Mm-hmm. And this is very similar to the problem of corruption, where we've had very few prosecutions, successful prosecutions of corrupt individuals. So public knowledge says that that is hate speech, but to prove it from a legal perspective is very, very difficult. And therefore, it doesn't matter. Somebody who repeatedly does it, as that cartoon says, appears to be, you know, immune to prosecution because it never happens. It has never happened. So it's very challenging. And for me, who is not a lawyer, I think sometimes we have relied too much on the external enforcement of laws rather than individual self-enforcement, where individuals should know what is not right, what is dividing people, what causes angst among people, what causes problems in society, and at an individual level, they should be somehow controlling themselves. But we rely on the law in this country, which I say is very unfortunate. Then people then don't take personal responsibility. So that is why we keep on seeing this recurrent problem of impunity.
So is it a problem with the law that we do have, that we're using, you know, the law as a fig leaf, that we don't have any clarity on this? But NCIC, they're not really off the hook as yet, because we see the recent report, if my director may just pick up on this, that NCIC was to provide or provides gadgets to monitor hate mongers. This was in the Standard, early in the Standard. Please, if you may just pick up that so that we can see what it says. And NCIC provides gadgets to monitor hate mongers. And let me just try and zoom it out a bit so that you can see it. It reads, police officers have been given some 267 electronic devices to monitor hate speech while handing over the gadgets in Nairobi on Saturday. National Cohesion and Integration Commission Chairperson Francis Ole Kapara also launched a robust elections monitoring program which focused on building and enhancing capacity of police to handle hate speech cases. So when he tells us that, yes, this will leave it to the experts, where are the gadgets in this particular forum that they were really talking about, like now in Kiambu, where we had Moses Kuria as well? We expected 267 devices, electronic devices, to be used. Isn't that so, Jennifer? So that is a stock excuse from the commission itself. They shouldn't be telling us, oh, the experts should come, they have the gadgets, they should use the gadgets. Your reaction?
Oh.
Yes, or you're just in agreement?
Yes, I totally agree with you, Debarl. One of the things, my mind went back to reflect and wonder, since the commission has been in office, what are the wins that it has had? Who has been convicted to success? And one of the things that they would respond to that is, we are not the ones that do we are not the ones that convict the individuals. And then the law comes into play, because now you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that really that this is the person, and it is not an edited version, and it's not someone being framed to it. There's a lot to go with it. Now, if there are monitors that can make a difference, why have they not been used? And even if they are used, now what is the mechanisms of being able to nail anyone that goes by hate speech? I think what would truly be helpful is having boundaries and perimeters of codes of conduct of any public servant, first and foremost. I think any public servant that should apply hate speech, first and foremost, is responsible to their employer.
Yes.
And that goes to the public sector as well. We need to come to a level where we do not need actually a commission to hold us accountable for our speech. We know that speech has the power to build and the power to destroy, and it needs to be, speech needs to be held with very high esteem. How do we deal with hate speech? Can we have the perimeters and the boundaries of dealing with these people within our institutions? I mean, if someone that is in government is going to have the hate speech, who is the immediate supervisor who needs to reprimand them? That calls for immediate disciplinary action. But when we wait on a body, call this the commission, that actually is the one that deals with the hate speech, frankly, Debarl, I regret to say that I really don't see the value And I don't see a way forward in this unless we change from the core in terms of Kenyans, our methodology of dealing with people who are not of upright character. And that bit is about character. We need to come to a point where we are not going to have hate speech in our environment, because it doesn't just affect, you know, the people that you're attacking. I think about the children that watch, our families at home, the young generation that we are mentoring.
Yes.
And guess what? We are raising a generation who believe that the way to deal with issues is to be violent, is to be abusive, and that's wrong. Absolutely wrong. So we need to say no. We need to, as an audience, be able to say to that person who is having hate speech, we aren't listening to you because you're not edifying us. You know, it just reminds me of the reckless driver. We sit in a bus or a matatu with a reckless driver and we don't do anything, where we should be able to say, halt, stop, we are not driving with you. We choose to get out of here.
Right.
And that's what we need to do. If people don't edify us, we need to walk away.
All right. Dr. Njoki Ngumi, are these politicians making monkeys out of us? Because we saw the whole suckers of them being thrown in jail, of course, and they came out saying, oh, we're going to come up with bills, and now we're going to reform our jails as well. Hate speech, they had lunch at Kosewe, we know Right Honorable Raila Odinga and Moses Kuria as well. We're back at the same center that we were before. So what do they make of us as Kenyans? Are they taking us for being fools, that they're acting on just maybe, as they call it, our selective amnesia? We have a problem, don't we?
I mean, Debarl, I don't know where to begin. First of all, I want to discuss this idea that government is one solid thing. So if a public leader or a public servant or whoever says one thing, we've already seen from the shows of the last couple of weeks that the judiciary is showing us that they are an independent body. And so it's very possible for all these commissions and bodies and parastatals and whatever to show us that they are independent bodies in as far as dealing with matters like this. It's possible. Why they're not showing us that is another thing. I want to talk about public service codes of conduct. Everybody knows these things already exist. Yeah. And like, if you're just a small public servant, I used to be just a low-level public servant not too long ago, and you couldn't even talk sideways. I mean, and not because you wanted to, but because you represented your office. You represented whether it's a hospital you work at, whether it's a school, and if you are seen doing X or Y or Z, you had somebody to answer to. So if there are people in this country who have nobody to answer to, those are the questions that we need to be asking. I don't think, though, that public servants are the only influencers of children. I think we need to be honest about the fact, and I'm sure Dr. Hart and several people, even you, Jennifer, we are aware that Kenyan children are already exposed to such a large amount of violence in their homes, from their parents, from their siblings, from their uncles, aunties. You have people who are just walking around. We are walking wounded in this country. So already our thresholds for what is harmful, our thresholds for what is rude, our thresholds for what is cruel, our thresholds for what is unseemly, our thresholds for what is mean and evil, those thresholds have already shifted. And so for us to come back to an understanding of what it means to treat another human being like the human being that you think you are, is going to take a lot of public national conversation. And let me say this, possibly to finish. There's ways in which when we talk about these things only in the context of politics, because people talking badly is not just a political thing. People being tribal happens at weddings, it happens in churches, it happens in schools. So this man saying the things that he said, which were incredibly ugly and absolutely unforgivable, and for the party to just kind of, the new Kenyan proverb is distance yourself. So to just kind of distance themselves and say there are some rogue elements in the party. What does that mean? When we distance ourselves even from our relatives who say tribal things, who say racist things, who say sexist things, who say homophobic things. When our relatives are the ones who talk ugly and we don't confront them, why do we think we're going to have a different reaction when it's a public leader? It's not It's not going to happen. And so I think in general, we are viewing it through a skewed lens. We're not viewing it through the eyes of the people who feel threatened by a statement like that. And I mean, even when we go back to the idea of expert translation, honestly, I don't have anything against the idea of expert translations, but I want to counter the idea that Kenyans only understand the language that they were born with at home. There's so many Kenyans who speak so many varied different languages that are not the languages of their mother, that are not the languages of their father. And the wider understanding of the statements of this particular leader is not something that the NCIC should ignore.
Right, but why should we have expert translation right now? What really made them go to the slammers then? Remember, they went to jail. Did we have any expert translation then that took them to jail? So I don't really understand that we want now to have an expert translation now before Moses Kuria is put in the slummers. And Kenyans, why should they be always belly aching on social media that he's been training for the last 3 days and they don't really, voice these things? If
I think Debarl, you're not being fair when you talk about Kenyans belly aching on social media for the last 3 days and they're not doing more. The people who are belly aching on social media are doing their part by belly aching on social media. In as far as our responsibility to public organs, it's the public organs that now need to do their job. So it's them that are not listening to the Kenyans who have issues, whether they're on social media or not. Also, Kenyans who are outside of social media definitely take issue with all of his statements.
But the solution will have been what we saw when the ministers were actually pushing the envelope for, to being reluctant about the reduction of their salary or the salaries. Some of the 1 inches they actually had petitions. Yeah. People are signing petitions. Are we
saying,
let me just finish my thought first. If we are really, agitated by the fact that they should have the pay hike and they're actually saying they will be beggars, why aren't we also really agitated with the fact that we have a person who is a threat to the national security when it comes to utterances that are rolling off his tongue? As in the chapter 6 of leadership and integrity of the Constitution.
Debarl, I think what you're calling for is a formulaic approach that we should sign petitions at every point in time, and I don't think necessarily.
Not necessarily.
That's not necessarily what people want to do. Maybe at this point in time, people are interested in seeing what the requisite people who are supposed to do something about will do. Right? And the other thing is that, in as far as money is concerned, already the nation was completely ultra hypersensitive with regard to the amount of money that people are earning, and that the Salaries Commission had already made statements with regard to reducing. So I think maybe with regard to the salaries, we had reached a point where people could not be pushed any further. Maybe in as far as hate speech, what people are saying is that we can actually take a little more. Who knows? Who knows? And so the thing we have to do to catch the thing ahead is to have the requisite public organs take charge of the situation. Okay, let's just put it
to a wrap right now before we take a short break. Let's listen from Dr. Ngaruiya very briefly. What I was really talking about is not really a formulaic action, but a collective action from Wananchi. Not necessarily pegged to the salaries, but even to this particular issue itself.
First of all, I really do affirm the institutions that we have established as a country. And as I have said, for those institutions to work, we need to give them time to mature in the way that they operate and in the way that they're empowered to operate. So I would say this: we have a lot to do when it comes to hate speech. And are we just going to pick on one man or one woman this season? There's so much history of this matter. There are so many people across the board, men and women, who have used words that really should have put them behind bars, but nothing has happened. And so I think we need to think, how do we want to execute this and begin on a clean page? But I totally agree that wisdom is needed, so that we are not just saying that it is Moses or it is this one. If you look at it, there is so much evidence. And as a country, we need to say, where do we want to go with this? Secondly, what those people say is who we are. They actually represent us. And so when we touch them, it's like we are touching ourselves. And I think, again, as Kenyans, I really love the way you've come out strongly on this, because we cannot condone it. We cannot continue to condone it. We need to say, when I say that I want this to happen to a person because they have done this, I should be saying, yes, I'm also willing to go through that because I have done it. After all, is that not my leader?
All right, so if the chair himself has tapped Moses Kuria as the one leading the pack, what are we waiting for? Chris Hart, before we come to you, Chris, what are we waiting for? The chairman himself has tapped Moses Kuria as leading the pack. He's saying there's so many others, but he's been known to actually be leading the pack. Yet no remedial action is being put forth.
I think the problem he faces is the one we were talking about earlier. Hate speech or any utterance that offends people is very hard to define. And it's a shifting boundary all the time. It's very easy to say that things are getting worse, but actually throughout history people have said horrible things. What has happened recently is we've become very sensitive to them. You read about universities who won't allow people to come and speak to them because they might be offended. Mm-hmm. We're in danger actually of diminishing the ability for people to speak freely. So monitoring where the boundary is between what's acceptable and what's not acceptable is very, very difficult. And so I think caution is needed. I think in general we should let people say stupid things and ridicule them as a society rather than put them in jail.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Caesar, finally.
Yeah, it seems we need to go back to the court of public opinion because the legal system does not work. Chapter 6 is so clear. Authority assigned to a state officer is a public trust to be exercised in a manner that demonstrates respect for the people. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this kind of utterances do not demonstrate respect for the people. So he's violated the Constitution. Second, it brings honor to the nation and dignity to the office. Obviously. And now when the chairman here tells us that we are going to look for some way of interpreting these kind of statements because experts, the court of public opinion and the Constitution says this is nonsense. So perhaps that's where we need to go.
Right.
But why aren't people complaining? Because it's not about money. You know, this country is so full of poverty that when people realize that there's a money issue involved, that's when they complain. But this is something which is in the Constitution, which is a value. And it seems we've forgotten that values are secondary because we are so much on a survival mode in this country that only money affects us.
Right, thank you.
It's a challenge.
Right. Or maybe we need to refer him to the conduct of state officer, which is Article 75, subsection, I should say, is subsection 1C.
Yeah.
That, or let me begin with 1A. State officer shall behave whether in public whether in public and official life, in private life, or in association with other persons in a manner that avoids, I'll pick on C, demeaning the office or the officer holds.
Yeah.
That is what we have.
It says in private life.
In private life as well.
As well.
Yeah.
So it's not even just these situations that are a problem. It's even the things that people say, as we were saying earlier, at their weddings, in their churches, at their chamas, and wherever.
So it's
wherever. Thank you.